我们今天是这个会分成4个部分来问这些问题，一个是职场规划发展，第二个是领导力和战略规划，第三个是女性职场领导力 D&I，最后一个是你个人的经历分享。我开始了，我开始好，那就第一个啊，第一个是职业规划的，What are your strategies for preparing yourself when taking on scope or responsibilities you haven't had experiences in before? I'm gonna try to see if I can use Chinese, but maybe English sometimes is faster. So I think you have to start with commitment. You know, making any kind of change is always hard. And you want to start with, you are all in for this. You don't want to have any self-doubt or any question to yourself to start with. So very, very important to start with commitment and the confidence that if you put your heart into it, that there's just nothing that you cannot overcome. That's how I usually, convince myself to start with. That's very, very important. And when you make these changes, if you're farther along in your career, there is always something that you can leverage. There are some skills that are highly transferable. It doesn't matter what field or what disciplines that you move to. For example, how do you solve a problem in a systemic way? Lots of algorithms or methodologies that are highly applicable. It doesn't matter what new problem you tackle. Divide and conquer, how do you prioritize, all of those things. So think about the skills, the transferable skills, and a lot of times soft skills that you can leverage from your past experience. And that gives you an anchor point when you go into a new field so that you can leverage the experience you had in the past. Anything you have done in the past, you always can leverage that. And then, of course, communication is another one that, your ability to be able to synthesize a very complex problem and communicate it in a simple way that people can relate and understand easily. Those are the kind of evergreen skills that you can use anywhere. And so try to develop those skills that will make you adaptable, no matter where you go, what problems you tackle. And then when you go into a new field, of course, there is a foundation of knowledge that you have to build. So, walk in with that humbleness that you have to figure out a way to rapidly grasp a good foundation of whatever the problem space is, industry, a new discipline, and all that. And find effective ways of learning that. It's another of those transferable skills. How can you grasp a problem space or a discipline in a shortest amount of time? That's learning skills. Again, if you train yourself to learn something really fast, then you can reuse those kind of skills no matter where you go, what you do. For example, some of the things I learned is when I walk into a new situation, I'll quickly assess my stakeholders in that space, and I'll figure out using my intuitions and past experience, who are the expert in the area. Because sometimes when you talk to someone who's the expert, it's 10 times more effective than you read, mountains of documents and all of that. And so, just ask people, spend 10 minutes or an hour with those experts and figure out a way to be able to go talk to them on a regular basis. That will just gives you stereo shots of base knowledge to start with, and you can do this a lot faster. Give yourself some artificial limit so that you can force yourself. Human brain works differently when you actually give yourself some constraints. And sometimes when you think you have a limited amount of time, your natural impulse of procrastination, you don't want to deal with hard problems, all of those will just overtake. So you may want to try to think about, give yourself some structure and artificial constraints, and that will bring out the best sort of peak performance from yourself. For example, in my job, we used to do a lot of these executive presentations. In the past, my team would spend months. If we know that we have to go in front of Satya, for example, for some sort of report or a review, a lot of team will spend months, leading to the event. I've learned over the years that sometimes just give myself 48 hours, so that I don't spend too much time preparing for it. And I want to put some time limit on it so that I can be as efficient as possible with the time frame that I, allow myself to do it. And that changes the way my mind works, and it forces yourself to be more efficient and work more effectively, and also find the sources of information that can give you that rapid grasp of the problem space. Yeah, and I think you will run into challenges and all that. That goes back to the commitment. Don't give up easily just because you got into a new space. A lot of people are a lot more experienced than you. You just have to accept that, give yourself patience, but don't give up just because you may be in a disadvantaged position. And so sometimes it takes patience, right? A lot of you and your kids maybe are all high achievers. You're used to be in a position where you are better than anybody else, or you're way above average than anybody else. And you walk into a new situation, you feel like everybody else is smarter, more knowledgeable than you, and you start feeling stressed. Don't feel stressed. That's normal. Everybody walk into a situation like that. And so have that confidence, give yourself the time, figure out how to learn and ramp up with the space most efficiently and effectively. That's, usually you'll be fine.
Yeah, thank you. I think I learned a lot. First, to have confidence with yourself rather than prepare for the worst situation. Also, even some cases you're not that high achiever, accept and keep working and keep practicing it. Okay, thank you. Second question: what are the key skills needed to transition between industries or product types? You have lead so many different products.
Yeah, I think it's learnability. It's a lot of things I just said. It's learnability, adaptability. We almost use the term growth mindset like a cliche, but in the end of the day, it's really not that different. You have to, whenever you get into something new, you have to have that mentality that I'm committed to the field, and I'm not afraid of making mistakes, because every single mistake makes me better, makes me develop better judgment, have better skills down the road. So this fearless mentality, just don't worry about what if I fail. It's more about what can you learn from it. And a lot of the things, I've worked in different industries. I started in Microsoft in digital media industry, then I worked in the gaming industry, then I worked on the communication enterprise side. I worked on shopping, BI, lots of different things. But as I look back, a lot of these things I learned throughout these different industries are highly, highly transferable. In the music industry, I learned about how the value chain works. You started with the content creator, then you have the distributor, platform distributor, and then you have the consumer, and you have the indie, content creators. Same as gaming industry. It's just that these value chains works differently in these different industries, but the way that how the industry is formed is very, very similar. Music industry back 10, 20 years ago is highly concentrated. All the value chains highly concentrated in content creator. The music studios, because there's only a handful of them in the industry. Gaming industry, on the other hand, is very, very long tail. There's a ton of game developers and content creators. So even though the value chain, you can plot it in the same way, but the dynamics of the industry is very different. Once you learn about how one industry works, You go into another industry and you will learn about the value chain, and then you will figure out the dynamics of how it works, and it forms a lot of the baseline for strategic thinking. But the key thing is you just have to have that curiosity, you know, every time you get into something new, you want to understand that inside out, bottoms up, top down, and those patterns likely are something that you can leverage when you move into an adjacent or different domain.
Okay, thank you. The third question, 如何有效建立和维护职场社交 How to effectively establish and maintain workplace networking?
I always start with, I think everybody has different personality, and you know, the way that you establish your own network is different based on what you feel is true for yourself. But I always start with authenticity, you know, 真实, right? Authenticity. You have to, because people will see, you know, I think you don't want to build network for the sake of build network, and you don't want to be transactional and purpose-driven, you know, I think people will know, right? You know, when Kelly was talking about the value of Career Club, you know, it resonates with me because a lot of time you just want to give. You don't want expect return, because if you give and expect something in return, it becomes transactional, and a lot of time you will be disappointed. You know, in the workplace too, you know, you don't just go build network because you want to get your next promotion, you want to get your project done. It's really about, I would call it a network of curiosity. You know, I built my network because my work lead me there. Sometimes I take on a project, and the project will have a lot of different surrounding areas around it, right? We call it dependency, give and take dependencies. And I always tell people, I work like a spider, you know, you know, we start from the middle, and I will start weaving the net, and I will weave a bigger and bigger net, because my work lead me to have that curiosity about my dependency. You know, I don't just work with my dependency because I need some work from them. I really wanted to understand, what are they doing? Why are they doing it this way? You know, the history of how that team and the strategy was formed. And so the knowledge of my project, I tend to grow, and my network keeps growing because of that curiosity. And I have found that to be the more effective way of building my network, because, you know, when I talk to people, there's a reason why I talk to them, and usually there's a give and take. You know, I can offer something on the table, they will offer something to me, and we may not even start a project together, but just because I have this knowledge about, you know, the things around my spider web, next time something comes up, it helps me to connect dots. You know, that's how I build work. But I also know a lot of people being very intentional about network building. You know, once you have those relationships and you want to do periodic check-ins and sort of hang out in a regular basis. I mean, I'm not a very social person, so I don't like to hang out with people for the sake of hanging out. But I found just purely based on curiosity, that works for me too. So it's different.
Yeah, thank you. Authenticity, yeah, and also, you know, spider web, that's very resonated with me. You probably already answered the fourth question. What are the effective ways of building strategic relationships with senior leaders from your perspective?
I think you have to know why you want to build that relationship, right? Again, it can't, like, if you build the relationship because you want to get a promotion, that's probably not going to be a good, you know, angle to start with. Any kind of relationship, to me, it's no different from senior leadership or peer or your direct reports. you have to develop some shared perspectives and shared purpose, especially with senior leaders. If you wanted to understand, if you wanted to build a meaningful relationship, you want to get in their heads and understand what they care about, right? What is top of their mind, why is that top of their mind, and what you can bring to the table, right? It's not about, sometimes people will think about this relationship as, I got to get in front of senior leadership so they know who I am and I can demonstrate my skills and I can get visibility. But that's a very me-centric approach. That's actually the very opposite of what would work, which is if you want to build a relationship with anybody, doesn't matter if it's senior or peer or direct, you have to understand what they want. And you have to figure out how you can add value based on what they want. It's not about you, it's about them. And if you can figure out what they want, how you can add value, that is a really good starting point for a relationship.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you so much. Yeah, the value you can bring on the table. Okay, number 5. 您认为在工作中什么能力最为重要 ？What do you believe is the most important skill in the workplace?
I think something that often, especially I think in Asian culture and for this community, is communication, 沟通能力, right? And sometimes it's, we almost think of that as, I think the Asian community, or maybe even Chinese culture, think of that as double-edged sword. Sometimes you hear people make comments like, oh, this person is all talks, right? Not real, PMs 一直就是能说，对吧？有时候大家说能说，还能说会道觉得是个贬义的 ，right？然后就是觉得能干才行 ，right？但是其实就是说，其实就是说，这个不是一个 either or 的东西。你看，其实就是说很多成功的人是既能说又能干的。如果你能够既能说又能干，你为啥不去 strive for that，right？然后如果光会能干的话，确实是不够的，因为当你带领一个团队，你的团队大家都很聪明啊，在你们的工作环境里，大家自认为自己很聪明的人很多呀，你怎么能够让大家觉得能够跟你就说 inspire other people to follow you, right? Follow your idea, to agree with your idea, and not because of the position you are, but because the merit of your idea. 那你就必须能够有沟通啊。如果你没有这个能力的话，那你 of course you're not gonna be an effective leader. 所以就是说，当你看到有别的人非常能说会道的时候 maybe not rush to just dismiss them, think that the success they had is because all they do is communicate. Actually, there's a reason why they're successful. So learn from that. How do they communicate? How do they tell a story? Those are the kind of soft skills I felt like a lot of time we in the Asian community often overlook. Sometimes it's because of the language, English is not the first language for most of us. And sometimes it's just the sort of cultural upbringing that we just, value way more about doing versus talking, right? And I think it's, you have to take a not an either or mentality, Why not be good at both? Because the people who's good at both is naturally gonna get ahead of people who are good at either or.
非常非常同意，我也是早一点知道这个就好了，早一点听到，因为我是踩过这个坑的啦。我记得我以前跟我老板就说我会 walk the walk， 我不会 talk the talk， 对的，而且还很自豪，对的，很自豪。其实你真正会做的应该是2个都会做。然后我记得我以前 啊，还跟我孩子讲说，我是一个 good student，我可以 get stuff done，但我不是一个 good teacher，不会教你们，所以你们自己学。其实我后来想，其实你真正是一个，就是你真正学得好的话，你应该能够把它讲出来，很浅显的，3岁的小孩就能讲听懂的那种话讲出来，是一种能力，非常重要的能力。
对，
这是我们欠缺的。好的，感谢感谢。下一个问题，Could you give some advice for us if we are in a marginalized project or organization and our efforts and good results aren't recognized or valued? What should we do?
You know, it really is very specific to the circumstances. So I'm careful about not, you know, please don't follow my advice to the T's because everything situation is different. I think you wanted to understand why your project is not recognized. You don't want to make assumptions. I think you want to validate. It's okay to make assumptions, but you want to validate that assumptions. You know, sometimes it is because you are working on project that does not add value to your business. In which case, then you have to ask yourself, why are we still doing this project, right? You know, sometime as leaders, many of you I know in the room are managers and leaders, you have to make hard calls, you know? If I'm working on something that does not add value to the business, should we change our strategy? Should we just work on something else that's more important? Why hold on to something that does not add value? You know, we do this a lot in Microsoft as well, because you know, big companies, when company gets bigger, there's going to be a lot of these different projects that get spun up. And right now, you know, we're at the phase where Satya is really, we're betting the whole company on this whole AI wave of disruption. So focus and clarity of strategy is super important. So a lot of time I ask myself too, you know, we have limited resource. Am I spending all the resource in the projects and areas that accrue to the strategy, to the, you know, value that we're expected to create? If not, then we have to change. So I think, you know, if so that's one possible option, is to really understand why. And if you don't believe it creates value for the business, then ask the hard question, why do we continue to do it? And that sometimes, even though it's the hardest decision to make, but it is what a leader is expected to do. Sometimes it could just purely because, you know, either you or your manager, again, this is one of those things, you know, if the project is actually strategically important, but you're just not getting recognition, then you have to look at, you know, there's gotta be a leadership thing, right? Because you as a leader of the org or of the project, you have to be the spokesperson for your team. It was another one of those things I remember I saw in, I do a lot of these women mentoring circle as well. And, you know, one of the most asked question oftentimes is people said, how much I should promote my team. A lot of the women felt uncomfortable doing that. They would rather want their work to speak for themselves, right? I mean, literally, this was what people said. To which my response to them was, yes, you know, sometimes even if this is your personal belief, and it's my belief too, you want to let your work speak for yourself. But when you are a leader of a team, when you know so many people are working for you for the project, for the vision that you have defined, you also have a responsibility to represent that project, to be the spokesperson for your team. So you shouldn't shy away from that responsibility. It is your job, you know, and it's very different from, you know, even if you don't feel personally comfortable of promoting yourself, you should feel completely comfortable and accountable for promoting the work that your team does. That's your job. And so you know, if your leader doesn't do that, you have to figure out how to help the person as well. But that's another thing that I oftentimes feel is somewhat of a blind spot.
Yes, definitely. I think it's an unconscious bias, for women, if they, brag what you have done, all this, it will be looked very not that good, However, if you're a woman manager, right, so you promote for your team's work, you promote for others, that definitely looks positive, even the subconscious one. I totally agree with that. Okay, the next question. 对年轻的毕业生、工程师和 IC， 你有什么职场建议 ？What career advice do you have for young graduates, engineers, and ICs?
Curiosity, stay curious. I think when you're in the beginning of your career, there's just nothing more important than that, you just have to have an open mind and have to learn a lot of the things. In the early days of my career, I work on a project no more than 2 years because I get bored and then on something and then I want to go try something else. And as soon as I feel comfortable with a project or some sort of task, then it's usually a time for me to go change to work on something else because I just don't feel, like I don't have the time to waste to stay comfortable, and that curiosity is what drove me in the early days of my career. And I still do today, if you try all kinds of different things and, AI, of course, none of us actually studied large language model when we were in school, a lot of these new technologies has evolved vastly differently in the last 20 years. But if you don't have that curiosity, if you don't have that learnability, it's going to be very hard to keep up. So I think don't pigeonhole yourself, right? Because a lot of people in the early days of your career, because a lot of people will say, oh, you're good at this, you're good at that, or you may tell yourself you're good at this, you're good at that. But I think keep an open-minded. I started my career as an engineer. It was someone who has been a mentor of me convinced me to try become a product manager. And I was initially dismissive of that idea. And because I was doing so well I was enjoying having fun and all that. But eventually he didn't give up on me. He kept asking me and I decided to give it a try. And I never looked back, It's like, oh, I should have done this sooner because this is really what I love to do. So to this day, I'm still very thankful for this manager / mentor of mine who saw something that I didn't see in myself and also didn't give up on me and persisted to force me to get this career change, encourage, not force me, career change that really opened the door for me. So, it's sometimes you don't know, some other people, you want to find the people that can tell you things differently, not just, tell you as you see it, and listen to those people. Even if they tell you you're not good at something, you're very good at something. If it's surprising, listen to them because you may find, they may open new windows for you.
Thank you. Curiosity and listen to other people's inputs, right? And explore, become the go-to person for the young graduates, engineers, and ICs. Okay, this is going to be the last question for the first part of the career development skills, skill building. 就您的经验，从 manager 到 senior manager 到 director 的关键成长点是什么 ？From your experience, what are the key growth points from manager to senior manager to director?
I think the key thing is you have to, there's these different staircases in your career, and you have to realize when you reach those staircases that what got you here won't got you to the next step. So there are things that you have to change as you go through these staircases. And it needs to start with your core belief system change, right? So when you lead a small team, when you're in an IC, your core belief system is probably, I got to do the best job I can, whatever that tasks or projects that I am assigned to. And, I grow my career by demonstrating personal excellence. When you become a lead of a team, then your core belief system has to change. It cannot be, I will be successful based on my personal excellence. It has to be, I need to be successful. My success is hinged on the collective success of my team. And so, if you change that personal belief, it will change the way you spend your time, right? It's not about me going into each problem and teach people how to do it. You really got to figure out how to grow the talent in your team that they can become the domain expert and they can learn the trade from you. When you become, say, a director, right, and you are sort of, entrusted with a larger org, larger scope, now you need to think about how do I create value, right? It's no longer about just, I'm interested with a project, I want to make sure it executes well. You have to think about, well, I'm responsible for a business, right? So how do I make sure that the business, I can continue to create new value, continue to grow the business? And you also, of course, have a much larger team. So it's not just about growing team, but also when I have a bigger org, I have to figure out what does this org stand for, what is the value of the cultural value, so that even if I'm not around, this org still can stand on its own, has its soul. And so when you change that belief system, right, at that level, when you change the core belief system, then again, you will change the way you spend your time. You will need to think about how, spend a lot more time thinking about not just the current execution. You have to think about what this business is going to go, where it's going to go 2-3 years from now. Or, even if 80% of your team is spending their time on the present and now, you have to spend some time thinking about, have people spend some time thinking about what about 6 and 12 months from now, right? You're looking at the horizon. Instead of, in addition to just spending time with your team, you also have to look at, at the big picture level, what does my org stand for? You need to invest in culture, invest in team culture. What are the kind of things that will help reinforce the culture of your organization? When you get into even bigger level, right? At my level, for example, I'm responsible for Microsoft's unified communication strategy. I also look at not just about creating value for the business, but I'm also looking at how do we, as the leader of this industry, shape the industry, not just about creating value internally, but also how do we shape the industry? Because there is an ecosystem of OEMs and our ISVs that actually grow their value on top of Microsoft's solution. So we do a lot, my team, I myself spend a lot of time with our partners, with our customers and developers to figure out, how can we not only make Microsoft successful, but also make the industry successful as a whole. And so that, again, changes how I spend my time. It's not just inward facing, but also quite a bit of an external engagement as well. But the key thing I still want to remind people though, is every time you feel like, you get to a plateau, or you just got into a new plateau. So it says, sometimes you got promoted from senior to principal or principal to partner. That's, Microsoft career ladder. Almost every time, every case I have seen is you have to forget about what made you successful to this point so far, and really learn from other people what new skills you have to gain in order to get to that new staircase of growth. What got you there won't get you. What got you here won't get you further from that point.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. What gets you here won't get you there. Yes. Okay, this concludes our first section about 职业规划发展。然后我们进入第二 part， 就是第二个 section 是关于领导力和战略规划 （leadership and strategic planning）。First question: What is strategic thinking? how to do strategic planning.
And I feel like I actually, when I saw the question, I actually put it into ChatGPT. I was like, give me an answer. It was like a really honest face. I was like, oh my God, I can't do this thing. It's too complicated. So, but anyway, strategic planning, in the simplest term, is like trip planning. You know where you want to go, you have a destination, and you go figure out the journey to get you there. Along the journey, there's many possibilities. If you want to go to Rome, there are many ways you can get there. Different routes, you can take different transportation vehicles. Along the way, that trip planning is everything, right? How do you anticipate risks? How do you know what your constraints are? You have a limited budget, right? How do you know what resources you get to work with? And based on, what are the, in the business world, of course, you have competitors too. So you may be in a competition with someone to get to Rome faster. And so, what are your possibility of success in this thing, and how do you sort of compete effectively with the other players in the field? And so all of those kind of multivariable thinking, anticipate risks, understand your constraints, and knowing where you want to go, of course, right? Knowing what are the resources you get to work with, knowing where your competitor is going, where the industry landscape is, like what you get to work with, right? Like today you can take trains, planes, and all that, but maybe tomorrow there's a new vehicle that gets invented, and can you leverage that for your faster journey to destination? So all of those things, I think, are part of the strategic planning, and no strategy is really good if you don't have a rock solid execution plan. So all of the things that I just mentioned is actually part of positive execution as well. And so that whole package is strategic planning to me. And usually, in the tech industry, especially because the variables are changing constantly, the technologies you get to work with, competitors that, in the field, very different when I look at it 5 years ago compared to now. So, throughout this, you have to not just have a fixed strategy, right? You have to, again, you need to be willing to move your destination. You also need to be willing to change your route along the way. But you have to tune in to what's going on the ground in order to know how you adjust it. So have that adaptability and, ability to just change based on the constant dynamics in the industry, competitor, and also your own budget, resource, etc. That's super, super important. That's, I would say, 80% of strategy, to be honest, because you can also always, it's not hard. You spend probably 2 hours, you can come up with a strategy for anything. But when you put it into practice, the hardest part is when all these variables that you started with started changing, and how are you going to adjust to it? That's the harder part. That's the execution.
Yeah, thank you. Be flexible and know your destination. Always, I think one more thing is important. 有时候做减法，对吧? Know which one to.
And the execution is important. It's very, very important.
Okay, another one. How to initiate a reorg?
Depending on what, the person who asked this question is probably in a leadership position. I actually think reorg is essential to the success of a business if you are working in a dynamic industry. In my team, I actually do, every year I have reorg. It's part of my rhythm of business. So every year I would look at our, of course, every company does this, you do a planning, longer range planning, about 6 to 12 months out. And I look at where we need to be. And then we do, I call it strategic resource planning. There are a few big objectives I want to get to. Then I look at, check some of that with my current org structure, where I spend resources, and say, do I have the organization set up to support these big initiatives I want to accomplish next year. Oftentimes, it's not. That's how dynamic our industry is. So I make this a regular practice, basically strategic resourcing that goes along with strategic planning. And then once I'm clear where we want to go, my team is on board with where we want to go. Of course, that process is a collaborative process. It's not a one person's process. And then it follows very naturally and say, okay, now let's take a look at how we're going to organize ourselves so that we can align our resources, align our execution to those different plans that we've made. And oftentimes, the other thing I think I do is, so I think first thing is long-winded way of saying that you have to have a strategy, you have to have a articulation of the why, that when you make org changes that it aligns with the why. The other thing I do, once you know roughly where you want, what you want the org to shape like, the hard part is actually executing, bring it down to, reduce it to practice and bring it down to execution. That's where I feel a lot of time leaders start spin, because you just have too many things in your mind, like this business priority, there's team morale, there's some individual talent that you want to make sure that you keep growing, or there's people who you don't think it's in the right job for the right role, so you need to figure out how to get the right person for the role. All of those things, when people start bringing like a vision and strategy into practice and actual org change, that's where most of the time churn happens, because you can't balance these things. And so the practice I do with my team is I first ask my leadership team to plot an ideal org structure, multi-pass processing. First pass, remove any people variables, just based on where we want to go. What is the ideal org structure? Don't worry about people, leadership, morale, blah, blah, blah. Just take that out. So that then helps us get a clear picture about what is the optimal org structure. Then you start putting second pass and say, okay, now let's introduce people variables, right? I have a multinational team, so we also have different sites. So usually, second pass variable I would bring in is site strategy, because you want each of our major sites to have some coherent sense of vision and purpose, and that's larger than any individual. And so we then apply the site strategy variable to the second pass, make some adjustments and all that. And then the third pass usually I bring is people, right? There are key leaders, talent that we want to make sure that no matter how we form and shape the org, that we can bring the best, we put the best people in the right role, and we can also bring the best out of the people who we wanted to grow as the next generation leader. And then there's also hard decisions to say some people we don't think is appropriate for the scope, and then so we need to make some consolidation and all that. But the reason you go through those multiple paths is then it helps us to come to clarity what matters the most, the second, the next, right? You can make decisions that will stick. Otherwise, oftentimes people get all of these mixed up and it clutters your judgment. You will know, in order to have success of your strategy, what are the bottom line things that is immutable, you don't want to change, and then what are the things that you can accommodate and change and make compromises. But you want to do it in a disciplined way so that you don't mix them up all together. Otherwise, it's very hard to achieve clarity.
Thank you so much. This is the first time I know how the reorg happens. Yeah, several passes.
Well, I would say there is a lot of reorg that doesn't happen that way, by the way. And so people will look at the reorg and say, like, I don't understand this, right? And if you ask your manager will be like, yeah, I don't know, just, it's some decisions that people up there made. I hate those three orgs. So I do these things to the point where the people who are impacted, their direct managers will be able to explain why we decided to do it this way. My reorg always have a document to start with, and I would take a first pass, and then, to make it clear what's important to me at a business level. And then my LT will contribute to it. When we all feel like, okay, it's good, then we open up to our next level LT, they will contribute to it. Everybody will raise questions and we'll try to, but that's a way to kind of get people's input, but also in a structured way. So you're not, open up with a lot of variables that people are trying to, you can't pin anything in the ground, right? You have to get stake in the ground, then the next set of stakes in the ground, then the next set of stakes, and then you ended up with something. Otherwise, it's all very cluttered.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for the insights and the transparency. Very, very helpful, for me to understand how, the business this works.
No, and like I said, like a lot of reorg doesn't happen that way.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's very demoralizing. So if it doesn't happen that way, you should go ask your manager, explain. Because, the worst thing is just something happened to you, you don't even know why the decision was made. And that in that case, your manager and leadership failed you. So you should ask them.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Next question. What do you believe are the core principles of managing both product strategy and the engineering teams effectively in rapidly changing technology environments?
I think there are a lot of principles, but I'll make it simple. I think probably the number one thing that I found important is know your customers. PMs tend to, is it okay? PMs tend to sort of more naturally be in front of customers and engineers, I don't know about other companies, smaller companies probably don't have this symptom, but in Microsoft, a lot of the engineers kind of hide behind PMs and they just fix bugs and get their ADOs clean and I found those to be really, really not good. And so one of the key principles for my team is I want to send engineers to talk to customers. We get them in front of customers when we have a live site. I do a lot of these exact escalation calls when we cause negative impact to customers. I drag along my engineering leaders and engineering managers just so that they can live it, see the impact of their decisions that they made to the customers. And now it's becoming a more of a cultural thing where they know the customers and they know who they are, they know what they care, they know the impact to their decision and how that impacted of our decision to their business. And just that mindset has changed how our engineering team think and function. And it's a uniting factor too, because, oftentimes in our work, you will find these different disciplines at odds about certain things, priorities and, the how of certain things should be done between PM, engineering, design, and all that. Once you put them in front of the customer and say, listen to the customer, then that oftentimes get everybody on the same page. So for me, it's just, there are a lot of things I can talk about, but this is probably the most important thing is to get everybody in front of customers and they need to care about customers.
Yeah, I really like that. I've been working with Microsoft. I don't know my customer. Yeah, I'm engineering manager, so I thought, oh, what's my customer?
Yeah, you should
I have to
talk to them.
Yeah, have the chance. Okay, that's great. The next question. 打造领导力的过程中，容易被人忽视和难以做到的是哪些方面 ？What aspects are easily overlooked or challenging in building leadership?
I mentioned this already. I think communication skills are super, super important. And I would further say it's storytelling skills, right? it's not about just being able to sort of talk fluff, you know. It's not that. It's really how do you synthesize complexity to distill that to something that is simple, easy, and resonate with your audience. Whoever that is, could be your customer, could be your team, could be your business planning people, could be your CVP, whatever. But it's just that ability. In fact, that was one of the criteria when we look at senior leadership promotion is ability to synthesize complexity. It's one of those things amongst a handful of other qualities that we look at, right? I mentioned this is, that I also oftentimes feel is the most overlooked area that, especially for Asian community, Chinese community. And I can't tell how important that is. In my own personal experience, I had a computer science major. I studied computer science in undergrad, but I'm also a studio art major. So I have a double major in both art and science. I can tell you that the skills I've learned in computer science to these days largely have gone obsolete by now, right? But the skills I've learned in art, in studio art training, is something that I still use every day in my job. Because one of the things that we do in art classes is we go into, I went to a small liberal arts college. We go into a class with about a dozen people, students, and people will put their artwork on the wall and you just go and critique. And you try to get behind their art and try to figure out what they're trying to convey, their emotion, their sometimes worldview, and you have to make it up in the class. And over time, and you interact with the artist and student, and over time you start learning that person better. You learn why they express themselves that way. So that skill, being able to sort of, again, think from other people's perspective, really understand someone from their perspective, understand how they express themselves and how you can express yourself. It's something that is immensely valuable that I still use every day in my work.
Totally agree, yeah. You overlook the skills is communication, storytelling, and put yourself in other people's shoes, what they want. Okay, the next question likely coming from Microsoft. What were the biggest challenges you faced in leading the transition from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams? How did you manage such a large-scale change?
It's actually really fun. I love solving these kind of problems because, by that time I got to Skype for Business team, at that time was Link actually. I've already worked on lots of different projects and shipped V1 projects and rebuild old projects and reship new products, etc. So lots of different experience, but I was drawn to the Link/Skype for Business job because it was something that I've never done before, which was taking two incumbent products. One is Skype, the other is Link. Link by that time was the fastest growing business applications in Microsoft at that time. I think it was like 2016-ish. And take those two and figure out how to move them forward. And we also have a project to converge the technology stack as well. And I've never done this before, is taking something that's fast running, fast moving, and try to figure out how to revitalize it, literally like rebuild the tech stack and the experience stack and underneath it. I call it, as to date, when people ask me, what is it like working on Teams? I was like, there's a YouTube video you can look up. It's a bunch of Middle Eastern people driving a very fast running car, and then, two guys hop out of the car, start changing tires on that running car, like tilting the car on one side, and they can change the tires when the car is still driving at high speed. That's called changing wheels on a running car. That's what it feels like. My last 8 years at Lincoln, Skype, and Teams is like that. It's changing tires on a running car. You don't have the license to say, let me stop the car and change the tire. You have to keep the car going because we're a fast running business. But the thing is built on very dated architecture and tech stack. So you also need to figure out how to modernize that. So those kind of things is hard, but that's also what made part of the job fun. Anyway, how to do it. I think we, I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of these skills you find it's transferable. Know your customer, know how, and then once you know your customer, you think about how to break down the problem in a way that is aligned to your customer, right? So of course, going from Skype for Business to Teams is a huge project, but I spent time to learn about the customer, and you can find, oh, okay, like not all the customers actually use all of the functionalities. Some customers use Skype for Business for just telephony. Some customers use Skype for Business for meeting. Some only use it for instant messaging. So, we started profile the customer, and we have SMB customer, we have small medium business customer, we have an enterprise customer. So you find ways to say, okay, can we actually segment our customers into these smaller cohorts, which then can let us start moving those customers by cohorts, right? The easiest one to move is these 1 to 10 small, we call VSMB, very small medium business, because they don't need that many functionalities and it's easier to migrate them. So we literally started building these cohort. We started from the easiest workload, which is chat. And then we went to meetings, and then we went to telephony, which is the most complex workload. It was sort of a roadmap that we plot out over the course of 2-3 years, but it was very sort of data-driven based on these different customer cohorts. And we matched our roadmap to these customer cohorts to make sure that when we transition the customer from, Skype for Business, we can guarantee that they have a great experience. And also we can build learning along the way, because if you start small, you will learn your approach along the way. You'll learn, oh, we missed this thing, so let's go back and, rectify our plan. So that breaking it down, do it incrementally, and have built learning cycles along the way. That is the crux of what we did, even though there's, a lot more complexity. But it started with, you really got to know your customer.
Thank you very much. Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, I don't know, so many, stories, changing the wheels on the fly. Yeah. But I really enjoy the outcome, the teams really like you said, especially the co-pilot part,
Yeah.
So all this summarize of the.
That's actually not changing wheels on a running car. That's actually adding a wing to a running car. So that's nothing to do with car to start with.
Okay. So this moves to the next question about hiring. How do you foresee the hiring needs of your organization evolving over the next year or two? What are the skill sets or roles be in higher demand?
I think obviously, Microsoft as a whole, we're really, AI is the bet, whole company bet. So a lot of the projects or talent needs is somewhere around the AI, right? Either you're building the foundational model, or you're building product, you have experience building product leveraging generative AI, or you have experience building platform that helps, Microsoft is a full stack, right? So this app platform and foundation infrastructure. or devices, hardware that helps leverage AI. So more or less, the future of the technology workforce, I think, anything we do is somewhat related to AI. But it doesn't mean if you didn't have AI training, you won't be able to find a job, because look at us, we got into this industry. We're still here today, and AI just kind of happened, take on its own life. And so I think it still goes back to people who have really good sort of curiosity, adaptability, learnability, right? The ability to learn. I often tell my team, it's the keep your feet on the ground, and keep your eyes towards the sky, right? I want to have people who are ambitious, but also not just having pipe dreams, but have that ability to connect big ambitions with how do you execute, what are the real world constraints and resource constraints that you have to be able to make incremental progress along the way. And those kind of talent isn't, like, I would prefer those type of skills way over practical skills that you have with AI, because industry is still evolving so fast, not that many people have that skills anyways. But those core skills is still the same.
Okay, thank you. The last question in this segment about leadership and strategic planning. The last question is from somebody, I think is a new manager. Join our team as a new manager. What should I do? What are some things to keep in mind?
As a new manager, I often ask people, why do you want to become a manager, right? Because sometimes people said, oh, I want to become a manager because I can work on bigger and larger scope. Hopefully that's not the only motivation, because if that's your only motivation, you won't be successful as a manager. Successful manager has to feel invested in other people. You have to feel rewarded by making other people successful. Otherwise, it's okay if that doesn't give you, satisfaction. Then you shouldn't be a manager. Just go be an IC. You can still have a very successful career. But fundamentals of being a manager is you have to enjoy and be willing to invest in other people's success. And so, as a new manager, go talk to your team, understand their drives and motivation, what drives them, what makes them, what demotivates them, and what are they looking for in their career that you can help. Those are the just baseline, and that will give you a good idea of what you get to work with, how you want to spend your time. Because again, as a new manager, the way you spend your time is very different from when you were an IC. You can't just, be successful by being an excellent person, an individual anymore. Your team counts on you, so you have to spend time with them.
好，谢谢。我们因为还有30分钟就要结束了，我们想留一点时间给观众，所以我们就挑几个问题，然后我们就开始观众提问。就是现在我觉得这个比较重要一点的问题，就是如果想对今天的职场女性说一句话，你会想说什么 ？What would you say to today's working woman?
I think what I would say is not just for working women, but for anybody who felt that they're in a underprivileged situation. It could be your level of experience, it could be your age, it could be your background or culture or whatever, is do not ever fall victim to the circumstances. There are just far too many cases where I saw people, and again, this is not just women, any one of us at one point are underprivileged in some way. When I first came to Microsoft, I came from a liberal arts college. Most people, I was surrounded by engineers, came from an engineering background, engineering school. I was not as experienced. I'm a woman, I'm an Asian, and English is not my first language. I'm sure many of you will find one of those things that, you fall into those categories. And in the moment you said, well, I am not able to achieve blah because of this, then because of, my background, my language skills, my culture, my gender, whatever, you let yourself fall victim to the circumstances, because those are the things you cannot change. You cannot change your upbringing, you cannot change your gender, you cannot change your level of experience at that moment. So just be self-aware when you fall into those kind of thinking, because that's a disempowering mentality. What can you do about it? If you cannot change, what can you do about it? Don't fixate it on that. I often, encourage people to go change it to some empowering statement, which is, what can I do? What can I do in this circumstances, right? My daughter gave me, one of my birthdays, she gave me a little painting that has a pig with flying wings that says, there is always a way. That was my mentality, and my kids knows this, doesn't matter what happened, don't focus on why does this happen to me, focus on what can you do about it, and turn those negative feelings to things that you can take control. That's probably the most important thing.
Thank you. So this is going to be our last question, picked on the Slido. It's personal experiences and motivation. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? How can introverts become more successful in the workplace?
I think I am on if you think about the spectrum, I'm probably on the spectrum, like somewhere near the middle, but more on the introvert side.
I think you're introvert.
Yeah, the easiest litmus test people often say is, do you get energy by being with people, or do you get energy by being alone? I am totally the opposite, the latter camp. COVID is like the best thing happened. It's like, I can work at home by myself. I love it. And I know a lot of people in my team actually struggle with that, but I was like, I'm completely zen about it. So I hope that's, I am an example where you don't have to be certain personality to be able to feel like you can make influence in workplace. In the end of the day, it's really just about how much, in fact, I actually think introverts are great, because a lot of the great leaders I worked with who are introverts are really good listeners. When they are in a conversation, they don't try to sort of jam in and overtalk you. They will hear and listen, they will process before they respond. And usually the response have higher quality. That's what I aspire to be. And I think that's the value that you can bring to the table. The great leader has to always, always, always be a great, great listener.
Yeah, totally agree. I think introvert can be very successful. Look at Lan here, right? So I'm an introvert too, also here. I think introvert definitely can be successful. So we are moving to the audience questions. Yeah. Oh.
I love the hand.
Thank you. Here.
Hi, I have many questions, but I don't
I how to be quick.
Yeah, but I really want to thank you, the Career Up for putting such an amazing event. I had an hour about booking the $50 ticket, but
Thank you.
and also for the tremendous effort for the last 7 years of fostering the Chinese professional community. And thank you for coming here and sharing your learning and insight and give back to the community. And I have to say this, like I also have something my kids know what I do is don't take no as answer. Very similar to there will always be a ways. So I'm Tajin. I'm the founder of Running Together, a nonprofit empowering women at workplace, largely inspired by Career Up. So One question I have is, from your perspective, what are some of the effective, scalable, and sustainable way to help Asian women at workplace? With both junior and senior women in mind. Thank you.
I think it's people like me, who've been through these unbeaten paths and be willing to invest time to, engage in these kind of activities. And I do a ton of one-on-ones and mentorship, and, sometimes it's group mentorship. I actually have an Asian women mentorship at Microsoft, by the way. So I think, I mentioned the underprivileged, right? Because every one of us has always been in some sort of underprivileged situation, but you are also overprivileged, in some aspects that you may not know, Once you have some few years of experience under you, you are in a position to give. If you've managed the team, you are in a position to show other people how you did it. And so that sort of give and take is the most practical way to be able to give back and grow the next generation of leaders. And it's not just women, again, like anybody here, you may think like I am disadvantaged for some reason, but if you think harder, you are advantaged. You have advantage in other aspects. And when you do consider use that as a gift to other people because they could use it. And my career is full of that, right? And it's not just people from the Asian community, honestly, like Microsoft is my time at Microsoft, the majority of them are white men, but they gave me a ton of advice and learnings along the way that I am grateful for. So don't just think about, we're underprivileged, just think about what can you do to turn your advantage to a gift. And that, again, goes back to what can you do, right? There's always a way, what can you do about it? And it's an empowering position.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I got one here.
Thank you so much. My name is Zina, and thank Ms. Lan Ye and Gabrielle so much. I can imagine that you make a lot of decisions, especially in Puyang example, you have successfully converted links to set for business to teams, which turned out to be a huge success, especially in the pandemic period. In your opinion, what factors contribute to the business decision of whether from the merging or purchase of other companies? Because to my knowledge, Microsoft has started investing business from 2000, but we gradually formed the structural team, and also in the past, Microsoft had purchased LinkedIn, but gave up Slack. And I wonder, from the individual aspect and also from the strategy or business level, what factors contribute to those decisions and what advice you have for us? Thank you very much.
I think when I joined Link, it was little over a year after we bought Skype, which was I think at that time was the biggest acquisition that Microsoft has made, one of the biggest, either the top one or two. And over the years, Microsoft, that was the period of time where I think Microsoft made a lot of these big purchases that didn't really amount to anything. We've learned a lot from that. One of the lessons that I remember we learned was, if you have to have a good DNA fit, if you don't have a good DNA fit, then you bring the company in, it resulted in organ injection. And that becomes very difficult to manage. So, when we bought Skype, and later I think we also bought a company, Yammer, as part of M365. Those are not really built on the Microsoft stack and isn't really cloud ready and all that. So we spent years and years to replat those products. So that's where it becomes really difficult to keep the car running when you're trying to change the wheels, especially you need to change all four wheels. It's very hard. And so sometimes you would look at this and say, do we really want to do that, or should we have just left those business running at full speed to at least secure themselves in the market before we go start changing wheels? I would say in the early years of Microsoft, we made some of these acquisition decisions and how we integrated them into the company's business. We've learned a lot of hard lessons that way. The later acquisition decisions that we've made, like LinkedIn, what was the more recent one? Like Activision was a more recent one, right? I think under Satya's leadership, those decisions were made, bold decisions, but those companies were largely run by themselves. We didn't try to force them to replat or reintegrate into Microsoft stack or business, and those are fairly successful companies by themselves, and we learned how to keep a different business, independent operation going in Microsoft. And those companies have really good DNA fit with our business as well. So, we had good track record that way. I wouldn't comment on the Slack and acquisition thing. I think it wasn't really anything serious. It was something emerging, definitely from where we see the market is going from that perspective. But we've already got a lot of tech inside Microsoft that we can leverage. And I think we made the right decision to build it ourselves, because, if we were to bring that in, we would have to replat it. Again, it's an emerging business. And if it's emerging, you bring it in and you try to change the wheels on a running car, probably the car will crash, right? But in that case, it's probably just better for us to build it ourselves, given that we already have all the parts that we need to assemble the car.
Makes sense. Yeah, thank you. 下一个问题，我们前面的吧，要不然，可以，对。
我的问题是，就是变成现象，很多人在大公司有了什么 career 之后，去创业，或者说这是一个风险很大的事情，不知道您会不会想象自己成为其中的一员？对于不同这些阶段的创业者，您会给什么建议？
我可能不会吧，因为我确实是想过在不同的阶段，但是第一个就是因为 Microsoft 有很多机会，所以说 it's like a lot of things like Teams in a way is like startup. I'm actually building a new business out of Teams as well, which is very much like a startup. Teams Premium is a new business that we're trying to build on top of Teams. So Microsoft gave me that experience that I didn't feel that I need to go out. And then also, if I were to go do something else outside of this job, I probably will go do something that's art related, not technology related on my own, because that's where I really have, felt like it's not satisfying for me so far, because that's another side of the interest that I have. And but I have definitely thought about it. My husband Ting here, actually, we were just talking about it today on our way here, saying, oh, maybe you should go out and do something your own. We definitely talk about it for sure. I think the thing, if you are looking to do something that's AI related, it's very, very hard to just I think start a business just on pure idea, because ideas are cheap by the dozen. It's like almost there's no idea that you have that no other people don't. So you want to have something to anchor on. That thing could be your network, or it could be I actually really love the talk that JC Mao gave last month, I think, in the Asian CIE event as well, right? It's like if you want to go, if you bring your own data, like if you want to go to some verticals like medical industry or legal industry or government, these are all massive industries with lots of money pouring in. Those industry has a ton of opportunities to modernize, and AI could be very, very disruptive and revolutionary from how this industry works. But it's just not easy for you to go in with pure an idea. You have to have some footing in there in terms of where do you get the data, like how do you access the technology of the current generation and being able to leverage the network, your connections to get a head start there and figure out how do you go into an entrenched industry, right? What's the angle to go in? Without that knowledge, it's very hard. Just, purely based on idea is very hard. So I would still say, pick the lane you want to be in, but make sure you have good support system to help you going into that industry. And you have to have some unique advantage here. Either it's time, right? Or sort of time to market or access to data.
Thank you, thank you. 创业的话，我们有一个西雅图创业协会是我们的姐妹合作组织，可以在那里试一试。他每周5下午都有活动。对，好，我们下面一个 question。
Hello. Thank you so much for your time. I think I heard about application and you have to advocate for the team for yourself. And I would like to know what are the technical ways that you could advocate the team. For example, just at Microsoft Soul Matrix, like everyone, like especially level of organization leadership, they might not know what you're working on or what your team is working on. So what are the technical ways to advocate for yourself or for the work that you're leading? And also, as a leader for the big organization, how do you identify someone who is not your LT? Like how do you identify their work? Like what do they do very successfully to show up?
Yeah, I don't know if my team is I don't want to sound like I'm doing advertising, but we use Teams extensively, and that has really helped us to flatten the organization from an information hierarchy perspective. We had to do this during pandemic, so my Teams channel, I have like hundreds of them. Every project has a project channel, every team has a team channel, and my team actually posts their status regularly. Some does weekly, some does monthly, some does bi-weekly. I don't have a fixed rule on how you want to post, but they post this, regularly, and that has really helped sort of flatten the information hierarchy. So I have access to, bottoms up information, and I made a point to engage with these posts when so people know, like I read those, my leadership team reads those. So it kind of create that virtuous cycle where, everybody's more motivated to share, and to the point where they felt like, oh, like this is actually really helpful for my own team and my stakeholder too, not just for my leadership team. And so that has created a really great sort of viral effect, because, if you work on this project, you will follow this project channel and keep track of everything that's going on. And a lot of our downstream, upstream stakeholders also started engaging in those channels. And so, every one of those posts, right, is a way for you to represent the work of your team in front of other people, other team, your stakeholders, and creating that rhythm of business for your team, right? You can decide, if I want to do this weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, or whatever, right? I think some of my team now have figured out how to use Copilot to compile status reports, so it's a lot easier now. But like that is a way to represent your team, right? And creating that kind of flattened information hierarchy helps me in the different levels of leaders in the org to stay connected with what's going on, right? I also have weekly office hours with my team where it's just 6 slots per month. Oh no, 8 slots per month, right? So anybody can sign up. I do it 3 different time zones because I have sites that's in different time zones. And people can sign up for those. Actually, it's 16 different slots. It's quite a lot. And those are my way. Then also, keeping track. I mean, people will come to my office hour and talk about all kinds of things like career advice, how my project is doing. It's completely open. I found those to be super helpful for me to keep a pulse of what's going on with the team, and they really like that too. But these are, I think the key thing is you just have to figure out what are the communication channels that are effective for these kind of things. So it's not like, I don't like emails because it just feels transactional, right? You sent an email and then you have to respond, but this has been really helpful for us.
I echo that. I definitely like use Teams a lot. Yeah， 我们只有最后8分钟了，我们最后1到2个问题吧。最后2个问题，真的。
So my name is Emily. Thank you for your time today. I'm really curious about how you balance your personal life with your work. I feel like for a lot of people like me, who might be in my mid-20s, Asian woman, you can want to get married and have kids. So I'm just wondering how you balance your personal life against your career trajectory.
Yeah, I think the one thing is how now I look back, right? Because in the early in my 20s, I kind of think of it as a zero-sum game. Like if I do in Microsoft, they used to have a saying, there's in our old reward system, for those of you who's been here around for a long time, it was 5 points based system. So most people get either 3 or 4. So there used to be a sort of like an urban myth that says you can only get 7. If you get 4 at work, you get 3 at home. If you get 3 at work, then you get 4 at home. So that's a zero-sum thinking, right? Like you can only get this much, and it's always a trade-off. You can do this, but not that. You can do that, but not this. That was kind of my early days of thinking. And now I look back, I was like, why did I believe that? Why can I get 4 and 4 both at work and life? It is possible. It's not impossible. It's just that you don't want to start with that zero-sum thinking. You get better at it. You try to figure out how can, don't start with, it is something you have to trade off. You start with, I want to be good at both. And you will find the creative ways to get better and better at both. And it doesn't have to be a trade-off. That's kind of like what I have learned over the years. I have 2 kids. My husband and I, we're both very, very busy. We're both in the tech industry. Both our kids are in college now. I think there is no better gift you give to your children by being a steady, positive influence in their life. There is no better. You can teach them all kinds of things. You think you can tell them what to do, plot a path for them. Nothing compares you yourself being a steady, positive influence in their life. I would trade places with you because I think if you're not married, if you don't have kids, if you have the right mindset walking into that journey, you are in for a lifetime of experience and memorable moments. And then there's nothing that is more rewarding than being a parent and in a happy relationship. But you have to start with that winning mindset, not a losing mindset, that it is a trade-off. The other thing I often tell people based on my own experience, especially if you are a woman, is to invest in yourself. Again, I go back to there's no better gifts you give to your children by being a positive, steady influence in their life. So you have to invest in yourself to have a fulfilling life and career, be a great role model for them. And they know what does it mean to be a happy, fulfilling, positive person in life. If you don't invest in yourself, and just oftentimes I see so many parents believe being parents is about sacrifice, right? Why? You don't need to sacrifice yourself. You have to be a better version of yourself for your children. Anyway, invest in yourself. Be the best version of yourself you can. You will have, and be the stable, positive influence for other people, and you will have a lot of fun, lot of great journey ahead of you. And I can't say anything that I would regret as a parent. It's just amazing how much they can take you to experience the world in ways that I would have never done it by myself. It's a immersive experience.
感谢。鸡娃不如鸡不及了，言传不如身教。好，最后一个问题，最后一个问题。
Again, I really appreciate this being very inspiring sharing. I learned so much from you. And since I'm the
Thank you.
last person here, I also want to give a big shout out to our volunteers. We really So my question for you, Lan, is you talk about building the relationship, building the network with senior leaders. Sadly, that's also one of my biggest improvement areas as my manager volunteer. I'm currently in a situation where I don't have a mentor, and also in my work, I do have a lot of opportunity to engage with partners and VP level people, but the relationship with them always stuck at the transaction.
Transaction, yeah. Work related.
To the next level.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, could you expand a little bit more on how to approach someone you have been longing for, building that relationship, like mentorship for a very, very long time? How to reach out and start doing that relationship, and also how to take that transactional level relationship to the next level?
Yeah, no, very good question. Actually, that was one of the questions that was in the list, and I was gonna say, yes, this is the one that I want to talk about. It's very simple. You just need to ask. Like, this was one thing, again, I think in Asian culture, we somehow are shy or hesitant about asking other people. I'll give you a story. There was one period in my life, not in my work, that I was not happy with my job, because I felt like I've outgrown my manager, right? Like my skills and all that. And it's hard to say. It's like, I don't go to my manager and say, I think I've outgrown you. What do I do? Like that's a kind of offensive thing to say. But I was not happy. So I went and talked to old manager of mine, who's my mentor. I kind of casually, he mentors me. So I was like, what do I do? I felt like I'm not learning much, and I kind of constrained working for this person. I'm gonna go look for something else. And the person asked me, my skip manager, who was a brilliant guy. But anyway, my mentor said, did you tell Chad that? I said, no, I didn't. He was like, why didn't you not tell him? Like, give him the data, then you give him a chance to think about what he can do. If you don't give him the data and he doesn't know that you're not happy, then, how does he help, right? So I was like, yeah, why did I not tell him? I should go tell him. So, I did the thing. I went and talked to, of course, I didn't say I outgrow my manager. I just said, there are things I'm looking for that I'm not getting from my current job. Chad, can you please help me? And they found me a different job, right? And so that was one thing that I thought it was a really good reminder for myself, because sometimes we kind of like, I kind of like marinate this in my head over and over again. It's like, I'm agonizing, I'm not really growing from this job. What do I do? Sometimes just go talk to someone and say, this is what I want, right? And still today, like I do these one-on-ones I mentioned, somebody who's in the very junior, the position will come to me and say, Lan, I have these career aspirations and this is what I want. And how do you think I approach my career? And my first question usually is, have you talked to your manager? You would be amazed how many people don't talk to their manager about their aspirations, because they're like, yeah, I don't know, I feel like if I tell them, I put them in a difficult situation, like I just got promoted, should I tell them, like, if I go ask them, tell them like, what do I need to do to get to the next level? Is that too soon? Am I, making my manager's job difficult? I'm like, that's their job. Like good managers should not feel intimidated by someone who wants to grow in their career, and you should talk about it. And you would be amazed how many people would be willing to help you, actually. I learned a lot through my career by just being forefront about what I want or what I don't feel satisfied. And I usually get the help I want.
好的，非常感谢。那今天的活动就到此结束，现在。